To begin adding some form of interactivity to my project, what it's first going to require me to do is I need to have some type of object that I can work with. Now, a key thing about it is objects that you are going to work with and you want to be interactive, those objects need to have what's referred to as an instance name. Now, when I look at this shape that I've drawn here and I look in the properties, I see nowhere that I can add an instance name to this object. The only way I can add an instance name to an object is if that object is a symbol. And it needs to be a button or a movie clip. I'm going to encourage you to just make everything a movie clip because you can tell movie clips to act like buttons. Button symbols, because if you remember when you convert something to a symbol, you have movie clip, graphic, and button as your three symbol types. A button is really a specialized version of a movie clip. It's a 4-frame long movie clip. But you can do everything with a movie clip that you could do with a button, and you can do more when it's a movie clip. So I would encourage you to always just use movie clip. So I created a shape. I'm going to convert it to a symbol. I'm going to call it box. Now, a few things are happening here. One, when I typed this in, I used a capital letter, and we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. So the symbol here, it tells me this is an instance of the box symbol. If I look in my library, there is my box symbol. So if I had a different object, and now this object now, there are certain words that you don't want to use in your symbol names because they're reserved words. They're words that are already part of the programming language. And you won't really find that out until you start doing more advanced work. So you don't have to worry too much about it. But now and again, your project will freak out because you named an object or used an instance name of something that's an actual reserved word. So it's a word that's part of the language. And then that can cause difficulty with it. So now we can see that this, the red, is an instance of my box. The green is an instance of cir, my shortened version of circle. Neither one has an instance name, which I can see up here in the property panel, up at the top where it says instance name. Now, if you've wrecked your UI on the computer so that you don't see these things in the same place as mine, I would encourage you to go where it says Essentials and choose Reset Essentials to reset the UI so that everything is now at the factory default setting. So, circle here, I can now refer to this as my circle, and I can refer to this object as my box. Now, a couple things are happening with my names that I used here. So the names that I'm using are two words, my and box, or my and circle. I did not put a space between them. I capitalized the first letter in the second word, but not the first letter in the first word. Programming conventions with ActionScript are instance names do not start with a capital letter. Instance names always start with a lowercase letter. So lower case. They do not start with a number. And in computer programming, the exclamation mark in front of something is equivalent to saying not. So they do not begin with a number. So not with a number, must use lowercase. They don't must. They can't begin with a number. They should be lowercase. And instance names, no spaces. And that is even important enough that no spaces in your instance names. Only letters, numbers, and underscore are the recommended characters. No other punctuation. No spaces, letters, numbers, underscore. Begin with lowercase. Do not begin with a number. That is how to name objects. So let's zoom back out. So when I have an object, 2 words, I can use camel case, where the second word gets a capital letter on it, or I could use a hyphen to differentiate between the 2 words. Those would be the an underscore. Those would be the 2 preferred methods. No spaces. That's very, very, very important. I'm going to get rid of all of that. All right, so now if I want to make something interactive, it needs to be a symbol. It needs to have an instance name. Step 1, make it a symbol. Step 2, give it an instance name. Then I can go to my snippets panel and I can go find an action and work with that. So a very common one that people use would be, say, click to go to a web page. So I've clicked on my red box, and if I click on this action, I can click on the I next to it, and it will then give me the information on what it's going to do. Clicking the specified object loads the URL in a new browser window. All right. Now I can take a look at what the code is going to be. It shows me the code definition. And then I could click on Insert, and that will insert the code. Now, before I click that button, notice I only have 1 layer in my project. The layer has artwork on it. The moment I click that button, it adds a new layer. I can pull up and look at that layer. That is Actions. It opened up my Actions window, Window Actions, right here, which is Option F9 on Mac, Alt F9 on Windows. And this Actions window, I am going to, if I double click, it shrinks it down to a button mode. This is like all the different Adobe softwares now. You can turn all of your palettes to button modes. And then I'm going to just tuck this up here so it's out of the way. So I can click here, stretch this out a little bit. So we can see here is now the code that it put onto my page. So we're going to dissect this code a little bit. So the Actions is that little arrow. Again, it's under Window, Actions. And when I clicked on the snippet with my object selected, now if I click on snippet and say, click to go to a web page, it's going to freak out and say, this action requires an object to be selected on stage. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I should choose something before I do it. So when you try and use snippets incorrectly, they will let you know. They don't scold you too badly. They're not too offensive about it, but they do let you know that, hey, that's not how to do it. So I'm going to go back to the Actions here and take a look. It put a bunch of code here at the beginning that's gray. It's gray because it's a comment. This is the block comment tag. So the /* ends with */. Everything in between is a comment. If you want to do an individual line comment, it's 2 slashes. Like this, and now I can go, this is a comment. It's the same way that you can insert a comment into JavaScript or most of the other ECMAScript-based languages, of which ActionScript is one of those. It's very strongly recommended that you use comments in your code, because a week from now, a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, if you ever go back to it and look at the code, you will be left going, what's this do again? And you'll have to kind of mentally reverse engineer everything. If you put in comments by each line of code and say, yeah, this does this, and explain it, it works much better. ActionScript is not white space sensitive, so I can insert all kinds of extra lines to make it look pretty. I can tab things over more if I want to make it look pretty. It's all good. ActionScript will be happy. So it's not white space sensitive like some languages are. So that's good. I'm going to look at these directions. It says instructions. It tells me how to use this code. Replace the http://www.adobe.com with the desired URL address. Keep the quotation marks. Okay, good information. Now I'm going to get rid of it because I don't need that anymore. And I can see here is some information about where it's going. So if I want this to go somewhere else, I could change this to any other URL. So I could change this to YouTube if I wanted and save it. Now if I test my movie and look at this when it comes up, I can now click on that box and we'll see it went and launched my web browser and launched that link. It also dumps it into a new window. That was the morning class there. Dumps it into a new window, because if we go back and look at the code, it's also specifying the underscore blank, which is the same kind of attribute that you can use with a URL on a web page when you're doing HTML markup, where you can specify whether you want to go into a new page or you can write over the top of the existing page, and you could change that to other options if you desired so. Typically on a Flash page, if you're popping up a link to a URL, you often want it to go into a new tab or a new window so that it doesn't obliterate or wipe out the page they were currently on. But you need to figure out what works best in your particular situation. Now, to dissect this a little bit, we can see here's the instance name of my object. I am then telling it to listen for an event. ActionScript is an event-based language. It wants events to occur. When they do, it does stuff. That's how it works. It wants a mouse event. It wants a keyboard event. It wants a frame event. It wants a custom event that you would create, or a video event, or a microphone event. These are all events. We can tell Flash, hey, why don't you listen for this? And then when it listens for it and that event occurs, it then has an action of what to do. Actions are verbs. Functions are verbs. Instances in instance names are nouns or objects. So my box is the noun, and we're telling it to then listen for a click so that when it's clicked on, it calls this verb right here, which is the name of a function as it occurs here. That function, which is caused by a mouse event, we want it to navigate to a URL. So we're saying go to this web page. And then we have to tell Flash, oh yeah, and this is a new URL request. This is part of the verbosity of the language. Flash likes to do things in very it takes very simple things and does them in very complex ways, which in the beginning is annoying as all get out because you're like, I just want to do it. It's not very friendly. As you get more experienced, you realize it's great because you have control over everything every step of the way. So you can now listen for when something is clicked on your stage, and then you can control which objects are made aware of that and which objects are not, and then you can pass that message on to different objects without having to write a lot of complex code by just changing a few extra parameters that we're not dealing with yet. So it's a very granular control language that we can distill things down to very, very small levels. The price to pay for that is to do basic things sucks, because it takes 10 times more code than it should to do just basic kinds of things. But currently now, if I click on that box, it launches that web page. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go to my circle here. Now with my circle selected, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to look down the list here, and let's say, what's something else I could do? I'm going to choose drag and drop. So if I click under the info, it says make the specified object movable with drag and drop. OK. I can click on the brackets, hit insert, that comes up. I can click here to take a look at it, and I can see the code that it just added into my page. So drag and drop makes the specified symbol instance movable with drag and drop, and here it is. So we tell my circle to listen for mouse down. Once mouse up occurs, stop drag. So mouse down, we're going to say my circle start drag. Mouse up, we can say stop drag. OK, makes sense. And oh, look, draggable. Woo. Piece of cake. So I've now been able to very easily, without having to type any complex code, I've added now some functionality into my project. If I had, say, the Pitfall Running Jungle Man and wanted to make that object movable, we'll pretend this red box is said object. If I wanted to make that object movable with the keyboard, with the object selected, so remember it's always make a symbol, set the instance name, which I almost started working and forgetting to set that this needs to be a new instance name. So I'm going to call this guy because I'm pretending it's a guy, but I didn't feel like making new artwork yet. So that small red box is my guy. It's an instance of box, they both are. But this guy, I'm going to go find a snippet. And the snippet I want is to be, it's under animation. And I can say move with keyboard arrows. And I could look at the code if I cared, and we could see it wrote out a whole bunch of code for me. Wow, look at that code that I didn't have to do any work to write. Kind of like that. And now if I test my movie and hit the keys on the keyboard, we'll see that. Look at that. I'm now moving this on the keyboard, and it only took 3 clicks. Versus, oh, here, look here. We can see versus writing out these 3 functions plus these 3 listeners plus these 4 variables. So 4 variables, 3 event listeners, and 3 functions. Or 3 clicks. I'll take the 3 clicks, thank you very much. Again. When you add code to your project, if you delete code, or delete objects that are referenced in the code, so this little box here corresponds to the keyboard movement. So if I decide, oh, I don't want that anymore, and delete it, now if I run my movie, I'm going to get a whole bunch of error messages. Now I'll click here, notice I can't go to Adobe anymore when I click on it. This isn't draggable anymore, or Google, or YouTube, or wherever it was. And it gave me all of these error messages, because it says access of undefined property guy. So if I double click on that error message, it brings me here and says, yeah, I can't find this thing called guy. It's like, oh yeah, well I deleted it, so of course you can't find it. So if I want to fix this, what I need to do, the easiest way is delete that. And now if I have something else in here this time, and he's a happy guy today. So now it actually looks like a guy. Highlight it, convert him to a symbol, give him an instance name. So create artwork, convert to symbol, give it an instance name. The instance name must not be the same as the library name. That's important, extremely important, as in it will cause an error important. Instance name, library name. This is the library name. Instance name is the name of the one on the stage. Because I could have guy 1, guy 2, guy 3, guy 4. They're all individual things. So I can drag out another one, and that can now be guy 2. And capitalization counts on instance names. So uppercase versus lowercase is a different name. It's the same characters, but uppercase, lowercase is different. So white space doesn't matter. Capitalization does. That's very important in the coding. So we have guy. Actually, I'll make this guy 1 and the other one guy 2. So guy 1, guy 2. So if I take, for guy 1, he's selected. Go to my snippets. Click on move with keyboard arrow. Click on the brackets, hit insert. It puts it in. And now if I test my movie, we'll see that he can fly all over the screen. And guy 2 is doing nothing yet. So if I want to do something to guy 2, I can click on guy 2, and I could choose, we're going to choose rotate continuously. Let's see what that does. It rotates it by continually changing it. Okay, that sounds fun. That means he's going to get a headache. He's going to keep spinning. So we can see, look at that. And I didn't realize immediately he was going to rotate around his head. So yeah, he really, I think he's going to vomit soon, so we better stop that. We'll slow it down.
We should make it so it does that.
Looking at the code. Anytime it's in gray, that's a comment. I encourage you to add comments to your own code. I'm going to delete some comments just to make room for things. So I have the first chunk here. Allows me, when I click on the red box, it goes to YouTube. The second chunk of code here, these two things, allow it so that when I click on the green circle, it makes it draggable. When I let go of the mouse on it, it stops being draggable. Now we have move with arrow keys, 4 booleans, 3 event listeners, and 3 functions here. Putting it in. And then finally, I have my rotate continuously. The default rotation of the code is written as clockwise. To change the direction of the rotation to counterclockwise, change the number 10 below to a negative number, because currently what it does is it adds 10 degrees to the rotation of the object every frame. If I want him to rotate differently, such as in the opposite direction, change that to a minus. So it says guy2's dot rotation is rotation property. Take 10 away from whatever its current value is each frame. That's what this does. Minus equal says take my current value and subtract 10 from it. Plus equal says take my current value and add 10 to it. So I don't even know what his current rotation is. All I know is the first frame I add 10, the next frame I add 10 to that. So after 2 frames he's gone 20 degrees. More than what he currently was. If I want him to rotate slower so he doesn't vomit quite as soon, oh, don't go to 15, I'll go to 5 and slow it down. So now he rotates a little bit differently. You can see he's moving a little bit slower there. And besides rotation, we even have things like rotate Y, which is kind of fun, because you'll notice now it's like he's going in and out of the door. Because rotate Y means rotate around the Y axis. The Y axis goes up and down, so he's rotating around that axis. Rotate Z looks just like rotation. In years past, all you had was rotation. You didn't have rotate X, rotate Y, and rotate Z like you do now. But now you can control your rotation on all 3 axes. So if I wanted to rotate on X, see now he's flipping like that. Now if I wanted to, I could do multiple rotations. I can paste that in and have 1 on the Y, 1 on the X. You can see you're getting some pretty craziness and funkiness going on there because he's rotating on both. But if we did it at different amounts, you start to get some really cool 3D effects occurring. So used properly, rotating X, Y, and Z can be some neat things. If you're trying to figure out what type of rotation you want to do with something, in your tool palette there is the 3D rotation tool, and we'll see that now I have the blue circle, which is Z, the yellow line, which is Y, and then there's a red line here, which is X. So he's rotating on the X axis. I can rotate on the Y axis, and I can rotate on the Z axis. Or I can rotate on all 3 if I grab at the orange. I personally find that to be miserable to deal with because it's really hard to kind of ever land it where you want it to. But some people enjoy it, so more power to them. So now my object has been transformed within a 3D kind of space. So you can do some neat things with it. Now, it's 3D as in the object is a flat piece of paper moving in 3D, so it's not 3D as in a 3D solid. So it's not a 3-dimensional solid. It's moving a flat plane, like a piece of paper, in 3D, or within all 3 dimensions. So there's quite a few snippets that you can play with here. And once you start working with them, you'll find that you can start modifying parameters. You can start changing things here, because there's nothing to say that I couldn't go my box dot x plus equals 1. So if I do that, now we'll see that I'm now animating that box across the stage. Now the problem is the box is going to disappear because I never told it when it gets to the edge of the stage to stop or to go back or do anything else. So I would need to put that into the programming. The key thing to remember when you are building interactive programming, it will do exactly what you tell it to do. And if you fail to tell it to do something, it will fail to do what you told it, what you wanted it to do but did not tell it to do. It's very particular that way. It will do exactly what you've told it. If it's not behaving how you wanted, you need to look and see, are you telling it something wrong, or did you forget to even tell it something? And those are issues that we will deal with in the coming weeks.